I don't want to take time above the 90 minutes of this meeting from anyone. So good morning, everyone. This is Agustin Rodriguez with the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. Welcome to the Beyond 77 joint meeting for today, June 2nd, 2020. While this meeting is primarily for the technical or steering committee, we also invited the advisory committee. There will be future meetings where the target audience will be the advisory committee, and those meetings will be scheduled for later afternoons or evening hours. We are not going to do individual introductions. I'm going to read the names that I can see on my screen, then I will allow for those that I can't see or I didn't read the names for them to introduce themselves. But before I do that, I want to go over the guidelines for this meeting. So first of all, please type your first and last name, especially if you join after I call in the roster. And then tell us your jurisdiction or agency. Please mute your audio when you're not speaking. Use only one source of audio. So either your computer or phone, and do not put your phone or computer on hold. Please use the camera only when you're speaking, and try to submit questions in the chat box when at all possible. So for those that are not familiar with GoToMeeting, we have a couple of slides to show you or guide you how to utilize your mic, your camera. So again, this is going to help with background noises and connectivity issues. So again, try to keep your mics off when you're not speaking, as well as your cameras. And then for questions, we're going to allow, after each section, we're going to allow a couple of questions and comments, but we would prefer if those questions are typed on the chat box that will be located towards the top corner of your screen. My apologies in advance if I mispronounce your name. So I'm just going to read out the names that I see on my screen. So Judy Deller O'Keefe, Neil Burke, Robert Cook, Theo Thompson, Dr. Mike Miltek, Adam Howell, Andrew Ventresca, Andrew Gibbs, Till, thank you. Rinald Sheda, David Hooper, Dominic Boyd, L. Tedder, Gary Fournier, Gene Conti, Dean Goddison, Jennifer Fred Graf, Jennifer Humphrey, Kelly Robertson, Kent Robertson, Krista Gooding, Loretta Barron, Matthew Todd, Mohan Harahali, Brian Nadoldi, Abigail Osi Osamoha, Steve Bridges, Stuart Basham, Travis Morgan, Tyler Bray, Wade Luther, Warren Cooksey, Ryan Waterman, Bryce Taylor. Anyone that I didn't call, please introduce yourself, first, last name, and agency. Okay, well, thank
Michelle
you.
Peterson, SCDOT.
Good morning, Augustine. This is Molly Collins with Balstern.
Anybody else? Well, thanks again. Before I turn it over to Jim Conti and Adam Howell with our second item on the agenda, on behalf of the CRTPO, and I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. This meeting will be recorded and available at our website, beyond77.com meeting/committees. And I will be sending the meeting minutes along with any additional materials by next week or the week after. Again, thank you. And now I'm turning it over to Jane and Adam.
Thank you, Augustine, and good morning, everybody. Before we do get started, I wanted to ask you to engage with us at certain parts of this through the opportunity of some virtual polling. And so we're utilizing a tool called Mentimeter. So if those of you that have a smartphone or have the ability to go onto your additional browser on your computer, if you can go to menti.com there on your screen and use the code 702043. That way we can get that started for you. There will already be a question there prompted for you, but don't answer it just yet. We'll get to that in a few minutes. And we'll have that code up there several times for you to access. But if you just open up a browser and go to menti.com, we will go ahead and engage with you all as a full group as a part of this call as we progress through this. So with that, one second. Today, we've seen the agenda and we just wanted to go over quickly with you what our major goals and takeaways from today's presentation is. We realized that we connected with you many months ago through a kickoff and then just kind of a data overview meeting. But since then, we have been very busy in terms of just trying to study the corridor and understand exactly what is on the ground, all the different planning efforts that are underway, and then really taking a deep dive into the transportation demand model, the Metro line and regional model that is managed throughout here in this region. And so quickly, we're going to go through. Gene Conti, former NCDOT Secretary, is going to give an update of progress that has been made, as well as a quick overview. And then we're going to jump into a high-level corridor review from what we've observed from all the different planning efforts that have occurred within the study area. And then we're going to have presentations and team members present on what we're defining to be the full existing and future conditions assessment, and really kind of challenging how planning and evaluation of needs has been done in the past, and maybe looking towards the future to look at new ways. Also, there was an incredible phase 1 launch as a part of our study, and we've launched a very basic survey that received overwhelming responses. So we're going to present some of that information to you all this morning with some key takeaways from it that are informing how we go forward. So with that, quick reminder, again, menti.com, for those that you may have joined in the last minute or so, there's that 6-digit code, and we're about to get to that first question. And so that question is, when you're at that site, what comes to mind when you think about equitable mobility planning? Across any region, what comes to mind when you think of equitable mobility planning? We've seen multimodal come up a few times, transportation for all, economical mode choices, access, cohesive. Transit is a good one, where we'll be coordinating with the regional transit plan through the COG. Difficult, for sure. We'll give everybody about 10 to 15 more seconds. And just so everybody's aware, these are anonymous responses, but we will use them as a part of our study process, and we'll be able to provide this feedback as a part of our entire study, and CRTP will have access to this information moving forward. Choices, mode choice, connections to employment, timing choice, that's a big one. Various mode, multimodal is coming up several times. Give it about 5 more seconds. Excellent, and that's a good warm up to kind of get you oriented with Mentimeter. There's a few more questions throughout this where we'll engage with you on certain topics as we progress. But thank you all for participating with us on that, and we'll continue to have the group dialogue through this method. There will be opportunity for some question and answers. Like Augustine said, if there are questions and comments, please use that chat box function as a part of the GoToMeeting platform. We will address as many as we can within the given time constraints, and then we will have to move on. And those that we don't address, we will make sure that we wrap up and address within an FAQ type document with the minutes of this presentation. Okay, so Gene Conti, I would like to ask you to give a quick overview and progress to date.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Good to be able to connect with everyone this morning. This is a tremendous undertaking, and I appreciate everybody's contribution, the consultant team and the CARTPO staff in particular, but also thank those of you who are joining us from the advisory committee today. This is really about a new way of thinking about mobility, and I think some of your answers just a minute ago indicate that you all are on board with that concept, looking beyond the highway in particular and focusing on really local and regional mobility from Statesville to Rock Hill. The brand of Beyond 77 recognizes the foundation of the highway as the main artery of the network in this corridor, but the line and the 3 dots symbolize any travel pattern, whether you're walking or biking or taking a train or driving your car or getting on a bus. Every trip has a beginning and a middle and an end. There are also 3 distinct travel markets, if you will, in this corridor, the north, central, and south, and we'll talk a lot about those today. But we're always leaning forward and looking at the big picture and trying to understand how we can work and improve mobility throughout the region. So I want you all to get excited about this. It's a great undertaking. There's been a lot of foundational work done by the consultant team and the CARTPO staff, and again, thank you for that. We've reviewed and organized hundreds of planning documents from along the corridor from all jurisdictions. We've analyzed the details of the travel demand model that's used to look at existing travel and trying to project what the future travel demand may be. We've also had expansive and extensive online engagement, and we'll talk some about that as well. Broad public exposure. We've had 30 million contacts through ads and media, contacts with real people in the corridor in the region, 35,000 social media contacts, and 15,000 individual surveys responses. And that's, as the former secretary of NCDOT, we were thrilled when we got 15,000 responses to our statewide plan. That took us about 15 months to get that many responses. This project has gotten 15,000 over the last 3 or 4 months. So it's been a great kickoff, a great start. I'll turn it back to Adam, and thanks again for participating.
Thank you, Gene. And jumping through, we're going to do a high-level corridor review to help orient you with what our study area is and give a little snippet as to who lives here and what is on the ground. So just a quick orientation. The map on the left is the primary study area within the center that is a 3-mile buffer from the 77 Centerline facility. And then the secondary study area are all the different highway links that were necessary for feeding into the travel network within our primary study area to help us better understand movement of people. And then we decided to break this down into 3 distinct travel markets for a better detailed analysis: the north, the metro, and the south. And there is a blending of jurisdictions across each of those boundaries that we've defined as a part of our state area to allow kind of a blending of those traffic and travel networks. Who lives here? In the big picture, the study area is just over 1 million people. And in the grand scheme of things, the metro area as of 2018 is just under 2.6 million. So roughly 40% of the population in the Charlotte metropolitan region lives within about 3 miles of Interstate 77. And that's a significant amount of population to move through there. The pyramid you see in the middle is a simple breakdown of age cohorts where we believe they're either in school, most likely in the workforce, and then also most likely retired. and that kind of gives us a method to look and understand of the groups that we need to plan for mobility purposes. And the study area median in household income is just over $76,000, which is a few $1,000s higher than the metropolitan region as a whole. And then an effective way to demonstrate kind of a distribution of different races throughout our community is using the infamous racial dot map produced by the University of Virginia. Instead of showcasing one race on one map and then doing it differently like that, this is a really great way to demonstrate where communities have formed based on race and where certain blending is happening. And so this is just a great example to showcase this, and we can provide a link to this project afterwards. To define the overarching process for what is the existing future condition assessment, the first part is doing the full comprehensive plan and project review, looking at efforts throughout, travel demand model review, really getting into traffic analytics, and then really focusing on what we think as a team would be the preliminary needs. And when I say preliminary needs, it is not necessarily focused on specific pieces of infrastructure, but more geographic areas where we recognize there to be issues with congestion or land use connections between transportation options. And so that process for the plan and project review really consisted of creating generic names for creating a tiered level of plan review, primary plans being land use and comprehensive plans, secondary plans being the modal plans, whether it is a light rail or BRT plan concept or sub-area plan like that was conducted for the Mount Moore and small plan area. And the tertiary plans is just all the plan projects from both MPOs. This is including CARPO and RFATs across the state line. Looking at all the plan projects that both MPOs had planned and programmed for through 2045, which then leads us to realize some potential strategies. By the numbers, there were 17 comprehensive plans that we reviewed, which produced or we identified well over 1,000 individual strategies, goals, objectives, and policies. And then amongst below that, within the secondary plans, we reviewed in detail 42 sub-area and modal specific plans provided by all the technical partners and jurisdictions in the corridor. And then from the two MPOs, there were 385 projects that were evaluated and kind of analyzed to understand their impact on local and regional travel efforts. And before we continue, this is another opportunity for some questions. And before we go to our Menti browsers, when we did this overall planning review process, we started to boil down what we perceived as a team to be regionalized planning themes and how things started to come out of all of these plans, what was important across the entire jurisdiction. Some have things more important than others, but there were many things that united all of them, which started to define how we approached a regional planning discussion. So what do you think may be some common planning themes amongst all jurisdictions along the corridor? And I'll throw an example out just to kind of help the brain juices flowing is economic development. Give me 1 second, guys. All right. And again, you can answer as many times as you'd like. We'll give about 30 seconds. Congestion relief, sustainability, alternative modes of travel, housing, that's definitely a big one. Land use again. Give it a few more seconds here to record a few more answers from those that might have some ideas. Congestion relief, mobility, and land use combined. Absolutely multimodal solutions. Interconnectivity. Lifestyle improvement. So I know some of you may still be entering answers, and this page will remain active if you choose to submit more. I'm going to switch back to the presentation. So thank you guys for providing that information because some of them do certainly align with what the team came up with. And here on the screen are seven different common planning themes that were identified throughout the region, listed in no particular order. And that would be land use and growth, roadway and transit infrastructure needs, bike and pedestrian facilities specifically, agricultural preservation, economic development, resource preservation, and then public services / quality of life. And so what happened was to allow us to tie those common themes to the secondary and tertiary plans that are the plan and program projects, we set up a very comprehensive evaluation framework that allowed us to create a level of scoring to determine or indicate a degree of alignment that each and every single plan and project may have or have not with those common regional planning themes. So the outcomes realized initially are observed challenges and opportunities that then lead to certain strategies that could be considered with future regional planning. And so some of those that came out of the conversation were, again, the top one is the need for a conversation for regional planning themes and goals, whether it is just transportation focused or even bigger picture. Housing and mobility relationship articulation could be encouraged at a bigger and a higher level across the region instead of just locally. Aligning with regional planning themes combined with that first one. Integration of specific bike and pedestrian needs with land and mobility planning. And then at the same level, integration of transit needs with land and mobility planning on that. And then how, if there's a way to connect mobility planning with economic development goals and define a potential level of return on investment with transportation infrastructure and economic development initiatives. And the last one, while it may seem out of place, increased emphasis of resource and agricultural preservation. Several jurisdictions highlighted that there was a need to preserve land and or resources to allow for the purpose of making it a working plot of land. And even the city of Charlotte outlined the need to preserve land for even urban agriculture. And so with that, we'll go to the chat box in Augustine, see if we have any questions or comments from the group before we move forward.
Are there any questions? I don't see any questions on the chat box. Go ahead, Adam.
All right. Well, if there are more, then please feel free to drop them in there and we will get back to them as best we can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Renal Chetta, who is a part of the Beyond 77 consultant team, and she's going to present information to you regarding our land use analysis as a part of this project.
Hey everybody, good morning.
Good morning.
Adam, you want to move to the next slide? All right, so we recognize that land use and travel demand are very closely interconnected. And so as part of trying to identify needs for the I-77 corridor, we studied land use, existing land use patterns and future land use patterns, and identify changes in those patterns and growth in population, jobs, using some socioeconomic factors and built environment factors that you see on the right side of the screen. And the idea is that using these different metrics, we will be able to recommend good transportation improvements and also right size these improvements for the character of these areas. And so the first thing we look at here is the median income distribution by zip code. This was important because income in general, we want to include TAZs or zones which have low, we want to make our recommendations more inclusive, include zones which have lower median income, because these areas typically have a higher dependence on multimodal modes of transportation. They also depend more on a reliable system of transportation. And so reliability is very important for these regions. And so if you look at the map in front of you, we have 3 panels: the north, the metro, and the south regions. And then you see the highlighted areas in black. The lighter pink colors are regions with low income, low median income. And so that's south of Statesville, north and west of the Charlotte uptown area, and then Rock Hill. Next slide. And so keeping those regions in mind to ensure that we include them as part of our improvements, we next look at a bunch of different metrics for each what is called as a traffic analysis zone. That's just, we just call that TAZ, short for traffic analysis zone. And we just use these small regions of land to identify areas based on the Metroliner model. So the travel demand model of the regions, the MRM Metroliner model, we took all these metrics and data from there. And over here, you see all the different TAZs. The darker blue colors indicate a really high population density for the existing conditions. And you see a lot of dark blue in the metro region because there's a whole lot of people in those smaller TAZs located in the metro region. And then in the south region, you see areas around Rock Hill have that deep blue high population density TAZs. And this is important because areas with higher population density are also likely to generate more trips. Next slide, Adam. And so we go from existing to future year, and then you see these deep dark blue TAZs increase significantly. So all of the metro area is much more darker blue than before. And then in the north, you see areas south of Hunterville, there are more deep blues there. And then for the south region, areas around Rock Hill and along I-77, you see a more darker blue there all the way going to the state line. So we will understand and try to analyze these increase in population density as we go forward. Next slide. So very closely related to population density is number of households, again, for each TAZ. And over here, the first panel shows the existing number of households for each TAZ, or 2015 number of households. The second panel is future number of households in each TAZ. And the third panel is the growth in number of households. So we're just going to focus on the third panel here. And that kind of indicates that areas south of Statesville, you see the dark greens there, they have a really high growth in number of households between 2015 and 2045. And again, the other area is just southeast of Huntersville. And this is important again because more the number of households, the more trips are going to be generated in the future, so more growth. And so we want to keep that in mind while looking at what are the regions where we want to provide significant transportation improvements. Next slide. So then this is the metro area. Again, we look at the existing and future households in each TAZ, and then the right panel shows the growth in households in the metro region. And so around NC 49, Bryant Street, you see a whole lot of darker green TAZs, which indicates significant growth in households. A little bit north, there's a green TAZ there. So yeah, just keeping these in mind as we kind of build our story to identifying areas that will require improvements. Next slide. And then in the south, we focus on the third panel. We look at TAZs between I-77 and then US 21. Those are the dark green areas that will have a whole lot of growth in households. Next. So next, we look at number of jobs. Again, more number of jobs, the more trips will arrive into those areas. And so there's more need for transportation infrastructure improvements. And so we go region by region. For the north region, there's a whole lot of jobs increase. Again, we look at the right panel. There's a lot of increase in jobs south of Statesville, and then around just south of Huntersville area, the dark purples there. Next slide. Then in the metro region, most of the jobs currently are concentrated in the metro region, and then that's going to continue being there. And so when you look at the amount of growth in jobs for each TAZ, there's some growth in the uptown Charlotte area, but then you see the dark purple patches around I-485. Those are going to be areas with significant growth in number of jobs. So just ensuring we provide good connectivity to these areas as the number of jobs increase in the future for people to be able to commute. Next slide. And on similar lines for the South region, again, we look at the right panel, areas between the dark purple areas just south of the state line, west of I-77, between US 21, I-77, all those regions are going to see a whole lot of job growth. There's a Panthers facility coming up in that area, so that will add a lot of traffic there. And then a little bit in the Rock Hill, downtown or southwest of Rock Hill. Next. And so once we look at the increase or growth in households and population density in different regions and employment, then we decided to look at how land is currently being used in our study area corridor. And so that's where land use diversity comes in. In general, TAZs with a more diverse land use indicate better utilization of transportation infrastructure. They also encourage shorter and fewer trips, because people can accomplish the same goals within a smaller distance because land use is more diverse. And then in general, areas with a whole lot of mixed use and large diversity in land use also encourage more mode shift to enable people to switch to more non-automobile dependent modes. And so they're also shown to be associated with more vibrant local economies. And so, and similarly, areas that are more homogeneous in land use are associated with more auto trips because the people need to do their chores and get to work and all those things, and they have to commute from the more homogeneous land use they are in to another land area. So with these in mind, we look at some focus areas, just kind of superimposing all the different metrics that we've looked at. The left panel here shows household growth, the middle panel shows job growth, and then the right one shows mixed use in these areas. And so the two circles kind of highlight just south of Statesville and south of Huntersville, there's TAZs with really high household growth, and then adjacent TAZs with higher job growth. And so it's very likely that there are going to be some proportion of trips that are generated from the high household growth TAZ to the high job growth TAZ, indicating that there's an opportunity to improve mobility between these areas. And then the diversity in land use in these areas also indicates that there's an opportunity to shape or encourage more mode shift. Next. Similarly, in the metro area, we see there's along the I-485 roadway or freeway, there's not a whole lot of household growth, but then there's a bunch of job growth, and so this area is going to require more regional connectivity. There's really a fairly good mixed use along that I-485 area. So kind of looking at this from a regional connectivity standpoint, there's a lot of potential to add some transportation improvements here. Similarly, in the Charlotte kind of uptown area and around NC 49, there's a lot of household growth in there, a little bit of a job growth, but given how good the mixed use in this area is, again, there's great opportunities to provide infrastructure that would encourage more multimodal use of this area. And then there's that gray circle there. You see there's a huge increase in households, really not a whole lot of job growth in that area, and not too much mixed use either. And so people are going to want to move out of that TAZ, and there are going to be more trips outside, starting from that TAZ going out. And so areas that need more connectivity. Next slide. Similar pattern here. We'll look at that gray circle first. We see great increase in households, not that much job growth for the gray circle just south of NC 49, and then not a whole lot of mixed use. Indicates requirement to look at more connectivity to the region because people are going to want to travel from there to other parts. And then adjacent TSZs between US 21 and I-77 there around the, or within the red circles, indicating great potential for connectivity along that corridor and between those TSZs to encourage more people to be able to move from the high household growth TSZs to the job growth TSZs, and also add regional connectivity.
Thank you, Renal. And it's now time for another polling question. For those of you that have your browsers and phones open and ready, I'm going to switch over to that question. And give me 1 second while we get this one to move forward. And the question should be active for you now. What does mixed use mean to you in terms of land and mobility planning? Just using a few words to describe. Efficiency. And remember that this study is, while it is from CARTPO as a transportation planning organization, it is very much focused on, as you can see, trying to make better connections between transportation and mobility infrastructure in general. We'll give everybody about 5 to 10 more seconds to submit a few more options. And I do recognize that there is a chat coming through right now, or a question and a comment. I wanted to recognize that we have a Q&A session coming up in just a minute after the next section, and we will get to that to help answer that question. All right, these are great questions. Don't need a car for every trip. Good use for land use, resources, walkable neighborhood, diversity and efficiency. I think that can be defined in many different ways, diversity and efficiency. Live, work, play is a great one to think about. So walking home from the bar. All right. I know where somebody's going later this afternoon for a happy hour. Okay, thank you guys for this. Is really good feedback, and it will continue to help inform how we move forward with this study. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Wade Luther, who is also a part of the Beyond 77 consultant team, to talk to you more about our traffic and network analytics.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Wade Luther. I'm with CDM Smith. We're developing the existing and future conditions assessment for the traffic network. For the analysis of existing and future traffic conditions, we use the Metrolina travel demand model, which gives us a wide variety of data points. Next. In order to dial in on the congestion issues facing the I-77 main line and its crossing interstates in the study area, we looked at a broad set of metrics, good metrics to understand the big picture to direct the dialogue and see what the data is telling us. We looked at traffic volumes, vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours of delay, travel speeds, travel time index or TTI, and origins and destinations. In analyzing the existing and future traffic conditions in the study area, we started a very high macro level analysis of traffic volumes and subsequently drilled down further with more micro level analysis to determine existing and future hotspots. First, we look at historical growth in AADT. We looked from 2010 to 2018. In the North region, the annual growth rate was 2.41%. In the metro region, the growth rate was less than 1% annually. And in the South region, there was a 3.5% growth rate annually. This indicates growth in the suburbs or that the metro region segments are at full capacity. Next, we looked at the percent change from the base to forecast year of the model, and that tended to reflect the historical patterns we saw. We also looked at the major interstates which crossed and had interchange with the I-77 main line. The increases were near in excess of 25%, and those were at I-85, I-40, and I-277 and with US 74. The figure you see here, the thicker the red line, the greater the forecast increased, and the thickest lines are representing changes of over 150%. Next slide, Adam. The future year project locations were programmed into the Metrolina model. So we look at the map here and we say, what does this tell us? There's pretty good coverage in the study area. There's investment in many projects. There seems like a higher density of projects in the metro region. And there's additional projects coming online in other sections. There's intensive improvements to the south, and the improvements tend to be tapering off in the north, and all this is generally as we expect. Looking at VMT and VHD, this helps us to tell the story of where existing committed projects that you saw from the map before are working, as well as where additional focus should be made for future recommendations. Vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, is the amount of travel for all vehicles in a region over a given period of time, while VHD, or vehicle hours of delay, is the additional travel time delay experienced by travel as a result of congestion. VMT and VHD typically increase between the base year and the future year in a model because the 2045 forecast year has more demand. VHD is typically expected to go down when those planned projects open up to traffic on the road segment, but in rare cases, a project may worsen with delay on a segment. The hot lanes in the northern region opening to traffic is definitely responsible for VHD decreasing in the north region of I-77. So the VHD forecast for the north region is expected to decrease by 19%, while in the metro and south regions, VHD is expected to increase by 104% and 307% respectively. VHD at the crossing interstate routes ranges from increases of 224% for I-485, 467% for I-85, and 984% at I-277. We also looked at the average travel speeds as we're drilling down more and trying to locate these areas in efforts to pinpoint where all these segments have potential congestion areas. Looking at the 2019 average travel speeds in this figure, the blue line indicates northbound traffic, the orange line indicates southbound traffic. The green is the posted speed limit. So those are the observed speeds we've seen. Where there is a delta or a gap, you see a red circle placed. That's where congestion is likely occurring. Average travel speeds are falling well below the posted speed limit. In the north region, we're seeing this from Langtree Road to I-485 in the northbound and southbound direction. In the metro region, I-85 past Sunset Road in the northbound and southbound direction, and Nations Ford Road to US 74 in the northbound direction. And also for the south region, we're seeing some congestion there at the South Carolina-North Carolina state line in the northbound direction. When we move forward for the forecast year, you can see the areas from the existing are still there, and we see an additional area that has exhibited itself between I-40 at Statesville and the Mooresville exits. As you will see, much of these areas are projected to experience significant population, employment, and household growth. We're trying to make that transportation land use connection between the information that you saw in the land use content and then this information from the traffic analysis. So we're going to drill down further into a more micro level when we talk about the travel time index, which is our next statistic. The travel time index is a reliability metric. It refers to the consistency or dependability of travel times for a given trip. It's a ratio of actual travel time to time required to make a safe trip at free flow speed. The travel time index, for example, if it has a value of 1.3, that indicates a 20-minute free flow trip requiring 26 minutes during the peak period. Historically, volume to capacity ratio, or VC ratio, was used as the performance metric to define congestion. However, with the passage of MAP 21 and implementation of TPM, or Transportation Performance-Based Planning, with the FAST Act, TTI, travel time reliability, is now FHWA's reporting metric for traffic congestion. So the CRTPO has defined congestion thresholds using TTI, and so they've set minimal congestion, which is a TTI of less than 1.1, moderate congestion, which is a TTI ratio of 1.1 to 1.5, and heavy congestion, which is a TTI ratio greater than 1.5. In the figure here, you can see that the blue indicates minimal congestion, the light blue is a moderate congestion, and the gray is heavy congestion as defined by the CRTPO's MTP. For the 2019 base year of the model, the majority of roadway miles for I-77 and its crossing interstates show minimal congestion. If we shift into the 2045 forecast year, we see a significant jump, a significant increase in congested roadway miles for both I-77 and I-485. And so we want to look at this geographically on a map and see what is occurring there. So we've got a lot of spaghetti here. I'm going to try to clarify this for you guys. This is for the North region. We're going to go through this region by region. For the PM peak period, we're focusing on that. The left is the 2019, or the base year of the model projections for TTI. The middle is the forecast year, 2045 conditions for TTI. And then on the far right, we have the forecasted change. So you'll see the green areas, and focusing on the map to the right there, there's some improvement projected, and then as the lines get thicker in red, the condition is worsening in terms of percent change, with the thickest lines being greater than 150%. So what is this map telling us? And it's basically telling us that some projects are expected to work, especially the hot lanes along the northern region of I-77, and that the non-interstate roads will improve because of this improvement on the interstate corridor, but we still have deteriorating performance in the northern region. So if we move into the metro region, again, we've got the 2019 on the left, the 2045 condition in the middle, and to the right is that percent forecasted change. And so what is this telling us? You see a lot of red in downtown Charlotte. We can't really fix that. We've got some finite space to work with there. And so we also see that I-77 is continuing to degrade. And if we look to the outer loop at 485, it's continuing to degrade. And then that southern portion of the central business district, downtown Charlotte, where 277 and 74 kind of meet up, that is also continuing to degrade. Going into the south region, again, we've got 2019 on the left, 2045 in the middle, the forecasted change to the right. South of the state line and to the outskirts of Rock Hill and the Fort Mill area, you're seeing continual degradation. And so what we've done with that is we can basically look into another factor as we drill kind of further into the layers of the onion and talk about traffic origins and destinations and where trips are going throughout the region.
So Wade, before we do that, we're going to take a quick little break for some questions here. We see that there is a question in the chat box. And so, Augustine, I want to turn that over to you.
Yes, thank you. There is a couple of questions. The first one was from section 3 by Warren Cooksey, which is, if equity is a concern, does the focus on a single household income number risk obscuring the economic diversity of the corridor? Perhaps it would be better to present household income ranges by quadrille. And there is a second question from Dr. Mike Miltek. Please explain the mixed use index, this in relation for section 4. How is it determined?
So to answer the first question regarding the household income data, I know that we presented just the household median income for the entire region in that initial slide about demographics, but I'm hoping that the slide during the land use analysis presented by Renal Cheta, when she showed the somatic heat map of the diversity of household income across all the different regions that we've defined as a part of this project. I hope that kind of actually gets to answering the question a little bit more, but we can certainly look at, as we progress through this, maybe looking at the data a little more detailed to look at different tiers and structures to that. But using the census data of what's available and how it's broken down, that is what has informed us at this point in time. If that doesn't suffice, I encourage you to please place additional questions to help seek clarification, and we can certainly follow up afterwards. Now, to answer the second question regarding the mixed use, or I guess the land use and mixed use concept, while we haven't quite gotten to how we are defining some new concepts to play out, I may ask to hold off on answering that question in detail because we will have an answer for that shortly with our detailed analysis, if that is okay. And then if it doesn't quite reach that answer for you, then we will continue to address that in the next Q&A section. But we do have some answers for that moving forward as a part of this presentation. Okay. Seeing no other additional questions, we'll go ahead and continue on. Wade?
All right, thank you, Adam. So we've started peeling back the layers of the onion. So now that we've looked at specifically where congestion exists and we've started pinpointing that and where it's forecast to grow in the future year, we also look at trip distribution through origins and destinations. These started out as large tables with existing and future percentages of traffic for a 12-district region along the study area, and it was boiled down to this one graphic you see here. And so using 10% as the major trigger for trip distribution, the graphic shows in light blue as trips distribution in 10 to 20% trips, and the darker blue as greater than 20% trip distribution. And the circles show trips that are within each district. So to the left is the 2019 AM work trip distribution, and to the right is the 2045 AM work trip distribution. And so the key takeaways from this graphic is that in 2019, the majority of OD trips are within the same district. And then the key takeaway as we move into 2045, we show that there are increases of trips within the same district or adjacent districts to that home district. There's increases in the North region, in the vicinity of the Charlotte airport, and then the roadways external to the I-77 corridor, which are indicated by the arrows moving outward away from the 12 district region, are indicators of increases in trips as well. So we also did this exercise for truck trips, and we saw that the highest percentage of truck trips are also within districts with higher population densities like Charlotte, Mooresville, Statesville, and Huntersville. And similar to work trips, truck trips are external to corridor trips. What we can infer from this is that there will be less trips originating from the outer regions or the outer districts from the downtown Charlotte Business District into the downtown Charlotte CBD. And so that could indicate that there's a greater dependence on public transportation alternatives for the region. So in taking the analysis from the macro to the micro level, we developed a list of interstate focused congestion areas. And so that's shown in a map showing all of the preliminary needs for the interstate here, broken down in the North region to the left, the metro in the center, and the south to the right. We've got focus areas along I-40, I-485, I-85, the US 74, I-277 segment, and the South Carolina-North Carolina state line. Moving into the I-45 congestion area, moving into the metro region from the north, I-85 is experiencing congestion. It's only forecast to worsen north of the interchange with I-77. This is near Mount Morn and Davidson. There are a limited number of travel lanes in this segment, which is the likely culprit for the congestion that's being experienced in this area. Moving along to I-85, the congestion area, areas outside the I-45 loop in the Charlotte metro region are experiencing explosive growth. Nearing the I-85 interchange with I-77, level of service, as you can see, continues to deteriorate from 2019 into 2045. Growth to the northeast in the Concord, Kannapolis area and west, the Gastonia, will continue to put capacity pressures, and this growth will continue into the future. The US 74, I-277 experienced is in the northbound direction. Commuter-bound traffic attempting to access downtown Charlotte Central Business District. It's projected to worsen, and it's going to extend southward to West Airwood Road, just north of the I-485 interchange. Also, that congestion kind of continues down south at the South Carolina-North Carolina state line. Moving in the northbound direction, the forecast year extends that congestion further south into South Carolina near Celanese Road at Rock Hill. And again, the likely culprit there is the limited number of travel lanes moving northbound across the state line. There's a lane drop at exit 1A at Westinghouse Boulevard. Another observed congestion area was at I-40. There were some outlying data in the model. The Metrolina model was producing some outliers. When we looked at the VHD data, it was calculating like a 2,000% increase in VHD, and that wasn't aligning with what we were seeing in our TTI forecast. So we acknowledge that there may be some outlier data there and recommend further investigating that by CRTPO and its planning partners and subsequent planning efforts. So here you see the 2045 TTI forecast for those congestion areas. We need to go a step further and look at where there are impacts off interstate and where both interstate and off interstate congestion areas are indicated by our mobility analysis, how that aligns with what we're seeing in terms of future and projected growth in population, households, and employment growth, and again, making that land use and transportation connection. And so now I'm going to let Adam, I'm going to pass it over to him and let him discuss some of the non-interstate congestion areas that we were seeing.
Thank you, Wade. And before I do jump, I just want to recognize, want to welcome Tony Lathrop, who is a member of the NCDOT Board of Transportation. He is a part of the advisory committee, and he has joined us today and will continue to be involved with this project and also kind of help provide feedback and push this project further as we all continue to think beyond. So thank you, Tony, for joining, and I look forward to the continued dialogue with you and many others across the state and region. So getting into non-interstate congestion areas, this is the 2019 map, just similar as we did with the interstate focus one. These are non-interstate focus because we do need to balance our approach. You see here a holistic picture of where we are looking to focus our efforts. But the first one I want to start with is just NC 150 and Mooresville area, kind of leading towards from 77 to the east and where it becomes the bypass around the downtown Mooresville area. This is already its current status and has continued to worsen over the next 25 years. The next section is a unique one, as Asbury Chapel and Eastfield Road congestion areas just through the northeast part of 485 Loop. There has been a significant amount of residential growth in just south of Eastfield Road, which is the southern road right here. And this is kind of the next frontier for Charlotte and Mecklenburg County for growing development. Those are the only two roads leading in from Cabarrus down into 485, and there's going to be a lot of new activity happening there. I want to plan for the future on that. The next one is in this metro zone or the metro region, South Boulevard and Park Road. There's a lot of congestion that's going to be experienced through this section. A lot of it is partially due to the well-defined neighborhoods that already exist, but they are growing on either end and will continue to see infill development, and is also physically constrained by Sugar Creek that flows pretty much right down the middle. The next one we want to focus on is proposed to be the NC 160, NC 49 area, which is basically the Steel Creek area, which is growing immensely. And we also want to prepare for the growth that will be occurring with the new Riverwalk development just to the west of 485 between Catawba River and the highway there. There's a significant amount of growth, and we want to prepare the region for that growth with the best mobility options we can provide. Looking into South Carolina, US 21 and the Fort Mill Southern Bypass congestion area. Again, this is 2019 data. US 21 is in fact a 2-lane highway or roadway facility between the Catawba River and SC 460. which is very close to downtown Fort Mill where growth is anticipated, as well as the southern bypass. There's an increase in residential development and others expected to occur, and that facility can be evaluated for better infrastructure investment. And then the last one is Celanese Road and Cherry Road, and just kind of the north part of Rock Hill. Those roads are anticipated to all become heavily congested as they are all primary links to I-77, but also serving local communities at the same time. So how can we better focus to offer local mobility options in different ways? And this is that map, again, from a holistic standpoint, looking out at the future of all of our study areas that are non-interstate focused that we propose to CARTPO and our partners to move forward with as we continue to think beyond for better mobility options. So this is a quick polling time. I am actually going to skip this part in Mentimeter, and if you feel as though that we missed an area, I'm going to ask that you put that in the chat box for us to consider. But we feel as though we did a pretty comprehensive analysis and captured as much as we could. But if you do feel as though we missed an area, please put that in the chat box so that my team can work with CARTPO to evaluate and integrate as we see necessary to do so. So I apologize, but we are running short on time a little bit. So, but by doing that, those are our proposed preliminary needs. But in order to apply a new way of thinking, we wanted to combine this and traffic network analytics to define our proposed preliminary needs. And I'm going to ask Renal Chetta to jump back on. And before she does that, I want to ask her just to quickly define and help inform the group how this will help answer Dr. Mike's question, how we develop the mixed use indicator and what assumptions at a high level were used to roll that up. Renal, can you provide a brief insight to that before you continue with the next few slides?
Sure, thanks, Adam. So to calculate the mixed use indicator, what we did is we looked at all the GIS, county GIS database for land use, and we categorized all land uses in 6 major categories. So there's residential as one category, and then there's commercial, office, retail as another category, and entertainment and recreation, and then industrial, and then administrative public service kind of land use, and then all the other land uses in the 6th bucket. And then we looked at how a TAZ, what proportion of these different categories exist in each TAZ. And the more diverse that proportion, the more buckets that were filled for a particular TAZ, the higher land use diversity that that TAZ has. So that's how we can, go ahead.
Reno, before you do continue, I would want to emphasize that the effort was no small feat. There are hundreds of different land use definitions from I believe it's 13 individual jurisdictions along the corridor. And so our team went through all of those definitions to roll those up into those 6 assumptions or those 6 overarching definitions to allow this mixed use indicator application to be effective.
Correct. And I also want to point out, it's not necessary that a very diverse land use, there's no good or bad. It just, what a mixed use index does, it informs what would be a typical characteristic of a neighborhood. So there's nothing, if it's more diverse or if it's less diverse, it doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just helps us tailor our recommendations to the characteristic of that land use or to that TAZ. So with that, I'm going to continue with these slides. So what we did is we looked at all these slides and all these data in the past few slides, and we kind of decided to combine all these land use metrics, including the mixed use indicator, with all the traffic related metrics, which is the travel time index, to identify areas where we could actually make more informed recommendations for what kind of improvements we can do in these areas. So over here, you see like the darker blues. Adam's going to flip through all these slides, but the darker blue TAZs indicate a very diverse land use. That's from the mixed use indicator that we saw before. And then the red roadways indicate a very congested area. And so depending on how congested the area is, we want to understand how we can improve these TAZ. So if it has a more diverse land use, there's more potential to provide more multimodal improvements in those areas, versus if it's mostly homogeneous land use with a lighter blue mixed use in the background, then we want to focus more on either providing more automobile related improvements, or to also recommend changes to land use plans in the future. And so that was the intent behind superimposing these two metrics from traffic side and from the land use side, and provide a more meaningful recommendation to what the needs of the corridor might be like.
Very good. Thank you, Renal. And with that, I know that it was a quick run through. We recognize that a lot of that information you actually saw in previous slides. Again, I saw that there was some commentary about wanting this presentation with some good information. It will be posted to our project website, and a link will be disseminated out to everybody that's a part of this call. But with that, I'll send it back to Augustine to see if we have any additional questions or comments from the group.
Thank you, Adam. No, I don't see anything else, but like you say, this information will be available, and I'll be sending an email with this information as well.
Fantastic.
Are there any other questions? All right, back to you, Adam.
All right, thank you, sir. So now we wanted to take an opportunity to highlight, we did have incredible successes with our phase 1 survey. And to be quite honest with you, it was designed to be a simple behavioral travel behavior survey, just to kind of gauge some high-level interests, and people were interested. As you heard Gene Conti state earlier, we received over 15,000 individual survey responses in just 6 weeks. And that is in huge part to the background work that is happening from our PR team, the part of Beyond 77 project team, really engaging through digital media efforts. You may have seen our billboards up and down 77, digital ads across your social media platforms, as well as several public relations or media efforts that we all engage to be a part of to get our story out there. And we know that we can do more working with you to get that word of mouth spread to your networks. But as a part of the survey, we also received well over 100,000 qualitative comments. We left it by design open for some of the questions for them to provide feedback on different things, different roads they travel on, or different experiences that they're having. You can see a presentation that we provided to CartFo from a couple of months ago at this website link that you see provided there, where this presentation will also be posted, and a link to it will be provided. But beyond77.com/committees is a resource page for all of you as members of the project committee. It is not a public site, but you will have access to it just by having that link in that URL. So if you have not seen it yet, we did provide a spring 2020 update with a lot of good detailed resources, and we will continue to post information about this and our efforts there, and we'll communicate that to you as well. Moving a little bit further, because we had such an overwhelming response, we needed to drill this data down in an effective and efficient means for us. And so there was no way we could use just simple analysis measures that we were used to doing, and we built a business analytics platform using some AI tools to help us really analyze and understand, building in filters, and we're even able to assess a level of sentiment based on how people are responding and their sentiment towards their experiences on our roadway network and how they get from point A to point B throughout their day. One of the biggest takeaways is that the public is well informed, and I'm hoping that you got the conclusion from our presentation that we have really deemed it important to make a stronger tie and connection between land use and mobility or transportation planning. But over 60% of the 15,000 people that responded, and this is not just myself or somebody else, a part of the team, stuff in the ballot, these are individual people doing this, and it was truly incredible to understand that the public is so well informed that 60% of them was able to recognize in any way of phrasing it that there was a bad or poor coordination between land and transportation planning throughout our region. And that is very telling. And so that's why we came up with our new approach on how to think, which is going to require a bigger conversation on all our parts to encourage that dialogue moving forward on how we develop new metrics and criteria to encourage better coordination between those two efforts. We also asked a very simple question. We can look at all the data we've looked at all day long, but we also wanted to hear from them. Tell us what roads you use on a consistent or daily basis. And that was an open-ended question. We couldn't list all the roads for a drop-down menu. We wanted them to just tell us. And so here, as a part of that analytics platform, we were able to really dive in and aggregate all the different phrases that people use to define the roadways that they travel upon. And so you can see on the chart the different roadways that were listed, and almost all of them are actually captured within those focus areas that we presented on. So we feel pretty confident about that moving forward with how we start to look at and explore mobility solutions for different purposes of our region. This is just an interesting takeaway. We should know this from common sense, but there was a perceived sentiment associated with distance traveled throughout the corridor, whether it's on the interstate or not. But the longer your trip is, the less happy that respondent appeared to be when they responded to our survey. We will continue to frame our surveys in a way that it will appear to be as unskewed as possible, so that we can really truly dial in on sentiment applications moving forward. But we certainly, that is common sense, and we should know that the longer you spend in a car, most likely you're probably not happy about it. And then same goes for how often you have to travel on the interstate or connecting part of the parallel network. Is the more frequently you have to do it, the less happy you probably are using it. And then another interesting question we got into was asking what the preferred mode of choice and their perceived comfort level using that mode of choice. And so you see here, light rail is a dominant factor in what people want to see as that alternative mode of transportation, whether that is because it is the new shiny thing for the Charlotte region, or because it's heavily being talked about, especially with the Silver Line advancing and the Gold Car opening up, Gold Line opening soon. But that is up there. But then just after it is well over 1,500 people indicate that they just didn't want to take anything else but their car. Now we can play around with demographics and look at different age groups, and those options change significantly. And then we can also drill it down by race and understand different community preferences. So we're really able to get into looking at different equitable aspects from all different levels, and we can even look at income as applied to this. And the beauty of this platform is we'll be able to take future surveys and build on this platform to help inform us in a holistic manner. So we feel very strongly about this. And that is, again, a quick overview of the public survey. But before we move on, I'm hoping that my team has gotten you excited. And before we get to the chat box and just the initial opportunity to have a conversation about initial reactions, we wanted to just kind of sense, are you excited to help this region think beyond? And so if you guys go back to your Mentimeter options, I'm hoping you still have that open. Let me advance it to that question. We're having a little fun here, if I can get it to work. All right, so using your screen there, if you tell me you're all aboard and you're Jimmy Fallon, or if you're confused Ellen DeGeneres, or Kanye West just isn't really happy about what we talked about today, give me your feedback. I'm really hoping that we excited you a little bit more today. And if not, I would love to have a conversation with you in the next minutes or offline further as to how to get everybody on board with this. But I'm loving the fact that everybody's agreeing with Jimmy Fallon, jumping on board. So really appreciate that. We are about to jump into initial reactions and wanting to have an open dialogue that Augustine will kind of help moderate with us. So thank you for playing with me and having that conversation there.
Thank you, Adam. We do have a question right now in the chat box from Andy Grimsky. How is consultant for I-77 South widening project tied in with this effort? Seems like data from this study should have impacts on design for widening project.
So I'll take a quick stab at that, but we are in coordination with the consultant that is working on that widening project. They have been at the table with us a few times. Obviously, this is the first time we presented some substantive information, but we will continue to coordinate with them and share information for them. As you know, the scope of this project is to focus on mobility connections leading up to the interstate facility, which can include interchanges, but not the highway itself. And so that consultant team will work in parallel with us to best understand the data that we have developed so that they can refine their planning initiative with that.
Thank you, Adam. And I will add that we have done a coordination meeting so far. And basically what happened is the consultant team for that project is on hold right now, so we haven't been able to make too much progress on that. But we're waiting to see how things are going to evolve to continue that coordination with them. At this time, we are in section for dialogue. I know everybody has been waiting to talk, and so this is your chance. Now the floor is open. Please start with your name and wait about 2 seconds just to make sure that it's not lagging or anybody else trying to talk at the same time. So this is your time, please, to ask questions, make any comments. So we have the next 10 minutes for that.
And if I may, if just to kind of get folks started, if there's a desire to jump in but waiting, I wanted to just check in with Dr. Mike and see if my and Renal's quick explanation on how the mixed use indicator concept was applied and defined, if that was effective to answer, or if you had additional follow-up questions.
Well, I understand how it was developed, but I wasn't sure what the different colors on the graph meant. I didn't know if light blue was more diverse or the dark blue was more diverse. They used an index starting with the letter S. So I just didn't know how to interpret the graphs. And so maybe that could be made a little bit more clear as to which color was more diverse and which color was less diverse. Thanks.
Gotcha, absolutely, yeah. So when we looked at those maps, especially when we combined them with the traffic or the travel time indexes where you saw the red and yellows on top of the blue, the darker the blue was where we recognized a more diverse set of land use definitions existing within that geography. And so we wanted to look at that specific geography as an area where there might be the ability to understand, okay, well, if this jurisdiction is going to be planning for multiple types of development and economic aspects, then how can we also look at that from a mobility perspective and apply a multimodal approach for mobility infrastructure investment at the same time?
Well, I do want to applaud the effort of trying to go through every damn municipality's own definition of what they allow zoning wise. I mean, you have my sympathy and my congratulations on that effort.
It certainly was an effort, and we'll have all the documentation available to demonstrate how everything was rolled up for sure. But it's very cool to see it come to fruition on a map and to kind of tell the story.
Yeah, I would like to see that map in more detail, because certainly these issues keep coming into my consciousness often now. And also, how is this Beyond 77 related to another initiative called Connect Beyond, which is the transit planning? It seems like it's beyond a new catchword for planning initiatives these days.
That is a great question. And so I think we almost started about the same time. I know that their project kicked off a little bit later, but we are in coordination. I know that the project manager from the consultant team that's leading that effort with the COG was going to be joining us today, but he had something pop up. We are in coordination on a very consistent basis. We will be sharing schedules with each other to kind of understand where details lie. As you know and heard from our presentation today, that we are focused on all modes of transportation, which does include transit within a very defined geography, whereas theirs is spread across very multiple counties across the metro region. And so we will be looking
4 FBOs.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm on their policy committee. So
oh, fantastic.
I don't know how an ENT guy got so involved in transportation, but apparently I am.
Well, public health is certainly critical to mobility at the same time. And so we will be coordinating with them on a constant basis. We're actually going to wrap up about the same time, and we have made it clear to each other on the consultant side, and then the clients are certainly aware of it as well, that we certainly want to align where transit recommendations may come forward. One of the biggest pieces as a part of our project that may take a step beyond the regional transit plan or Connect Beyond is we're also going to evaluate, on top of the solutions that we present, we're going to be looking at innovative ways to fund, finance, and invest to allow some of these new solutions to exist now and in the future. So if we can do that and maybe help inform Connect Beyond with what those funding strategies might be, then it would be a win-win for everybody to focus on a multimodal approach regardless of mode. Awesome.
And I want to follow up with Warren Cooksey. If the explanation of the conversation, did you still have any questions on your comment earlier or question?
Not at this time. I'm going to take a look at the presentation again when we get the copy and just see again how it was done, because my recollection was that the number that was presented was said to be somewhat higher than the average for the region, so I thought it was a corridor number, and that's what prompted the question, because I think if you're talking about household incomes in a corridor of so many people, one number isn't going to do it justice. And if equitable planning is a concern, then perhaps by quartiles, 0 to X, X to the median, median to Y, Y up to Z, and you get a better sense of the economic diversity of the corridor. That's all I was thinking. Thanks.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a question posted on the chat box by T, I believe will be Tony Lantrop. The question is, how will a more aggressive transit future affect congestion?
Can you repeat the question? Is that for a question to me, to Tony?
Well, somebody posted the question for T, so I'm not sure if that was you or, but the question is, how will
that's from Tim Gibbs, it looks like.
Oh, okay, never mind. That is right. See that Tim Gibbs. Okay, the question by Tim Gibbs is, how will a more aggressive transit future affect congestion?
I think that is a great question. I think modeling that would be a challenge. I think that there are different ways that we plan to move forward with evaluating that, and one of those is working with the group as a part of these committees to develop a new set of evaluation criteria, and maybe one of those is putting a higher level of emphasis on transit, whether it is bus networks spreading more geographically or increasing frequency, or trying to look at mass transit along multiple corridors beyond what the current CATS 2030 plan calls for. So I think that it's a great question. I don't know if we could answer it in specifics now, but I think that we will be able to achieve a better answer in the coming months after we kind of talk about what the next steps will be.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, and I will add that that's going to be one of the main tasks that, or some of the tasks that will have to be worked and coordinated through the advisory committee. I think it certainly will be one of those questions that will be answered with the help of the advisory committee. We still have 1 more minute for this segment, or for section 6 of additional questions and answers, reactions.
I think, Augustine, if I may, I know that it's not really part of the slides and it was going to be a part of another update, but there was a comment earlier about looking at maps, and I know Dr. Mike and others wanted to kind of look at maps more detailed. We are in the process of finalizing an incredibly comprehensive geodatabase. So just as you guys are familiar with looking at CRTPO's MTP maps on an interactive platform online, we're building a interactive geodatabase of all the data that you've seen in front of you today, plus more. And so we're trying to build it so it's easy to go through and analyze on your own and draw your own conclusions. But also we're building a comprehensive story map, which will allow us to tell the story that we've told today using some really good imagery, applying some text to define things, but then also allowing you to interact with certain layers so it's not confusing, and you'll be able to zoom in and out per jurisdictions or trying to understand certain pieces of data that are readily made available for you without trying to understand all the different layers that we have defined. So I think that we'll have that available probably within the next month, and that will be again communicated out by Augustine or myself when it is finalized and ready.
Thank you, Adam. And Andy Grimsky just posted a question. Now he just said, never mind. I
read your
believe
mind, Andy.
we're on time to move to the last section, which is action items and next steps. So I will start with action items, and the first of that will be the minutes from this meeting. I will be sending out hopefully next week or no longer the week after that. And then additionally with that, I will send out the link again to the beyond77.com/committees. But at the sometime before the end of this week, we will be posting this presentation as well as the recording of this. And our goal, as Adam was mentioning, is to have this geo-based data as well as the story maps in a couple of weeks from now. So once that's also finalized, then I'll be sending an email with that information and the link on those websites. Additionally, for that action items, we have, as mentioned earlier a moment ago, was coordination. We're coordinating with the group, the consultant team that is working on the regional transit study or the Connect Beyond. As well, we'll be doing coordination with the consultant team for the 2050 MTP. I'll turn it over to Adam for the next steps.
For sure. And I know we have a couple minutes left with you all today. I want to respect your lunch times coming up and your kitchens next door to you. But this image that you see here on the screen is a publicly made image. It's on our Beyond 77 website, and it's to inform the public in general that we are in what we're calling phase 2, which is that in-depth analysis that we just demonstrated to you. We are about to embark on phase 3. Technically, today's presentation kicks off our solutions development process. So the next steps in the immediate future is, as you can see here, this flow chart kind of defines how we will move forward to when we eventually wrap up this study, which is in about 16 to 18 months from now. In the next month or two, well, in the next few weeks, you'll see some scheduling for some additional meetings with the steering and advisory committees. And the first step to work with the consultant team in CARTPO is to really develop a refined set of evaluation criteria. And that could be using what CARTPO and RFATs already use, or it could be completely clean slate and coming up with new sets of evaluation criteria based on these themes that we've talked about today and what is important from a regional standpoint, but also recognizing local mobility importance. And then we'll work with a group of stakeholders to talk about innovation, concepts of innovation related to how we move about from point A to point B. We'll invite key stakeholders from across the region and also from across different industries and disciplines to be part of that conversation. And then we'll work with CARTPO and the consultant team to really go through solution scenarios creation, and then we'll run the applicable data through models to help inform which scenarios will arise to be the most effective based on the criteria and innovation that has been brainstormed in the previous months. And then we'll also kind of blend in how we want to pay for all that. And if there's new ways that we could work with NCDOT to develop those funding mechanisms or regional entities to develop funding opportunities, we will certainly try to highlight as much as we can to do that, which will then all culminate into a recommendations playbook, which can then be taken to the bigger stage and allow for a bigger dialogue, which we hope that action items will come out of this plan and the region as a whole can move forward with this, as well as Connect Beyond and other initiatives currently underway to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it back to Augustine for wrapping up.
Thank you, Adam. Are there any final questions or comments before we wrap up from anyone? You're welcome to use your audio for that. Well, if nothing, then please feel free to reach out to me or anyone from CRTPO team, or you can reach out to Adam Howell directly as well. Again, you will be seeing a couple of emails from me within the next week or so. And then if nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you so much and stay safe.